With us now in the studio, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Good morning.
Good to be with you.
Let's talk about Sonia Sotomayor and what you said about her. You rescinded.
Well, I reframed it. When I did a Twitter about her, having read what she said, I said that was racist, but I applied it to her as a person. The truth is, I don't know her as a person. It's clear that what she said was racist, and it's clear, or as somebody wrote recently, racialist, if you prefer, and it's clear that she didn't just say it once. And I think one of the challenges for the administration is having first chided me for language, then having said she didn't mean it, then having said she ought to restate it. Now they face the fact that she has said this, written about it, 4 or 5 times.
So her language is racist?
The language she used, well, if you say people of this ethnic background are superior to people of this ethnic background, I mean, just take out her language and put in the word white.
Right.
Put in white male, where she had Latina, and that person would be, frankly, be disqualified from the court. It also would be disqualified as a juror.
If you went on and read the rest of what her comments were in that same speech, she also said, we must not deny the differences resulting from experience and heritage.
Right.
Would you agree about that? But attempt, as the Supreme Court suggests, to continuously judge when those sympathies and prejudices are appropriate.
Right. But if you read the total document and you read other things she's written at Duke and elsewhere, she consistently says, one...
Do you think this disqualifies it?
I think that it's very doubtful, because I think she was a good prosecutor. I think she was an acceptable district court judge. But remember, at lower levels, judges aren't in a position to live out whatever their prejudices are, because they're bound by the Supreme Court. If she's one of 9 people with a lifetime appointment, and you read what she said the courts should be radical, the courts should in effect rewrite law, the courts are where policy is made. That's a direct quote. I'm not very comfortable having somebody at that level with that level of power as a Supreme Court judge.
There's this growing even preponderance of opinion, though, from people who are conservative and moderate, who have served in court with her, lawyers, even other judges, who say her opinions basically are without bias.
Her opinions at lower court levels are bounded by the Supreme Court. The question is, I mean, maybe she didn't mean anything she wrote, in which case you have to wonder why she wrote it. But in article after article and speech after speech, she has said policy should be made by the court should radically rewrite legislation and modernize the Constitution, judges have to intervene on social policy, and she has said on 4 or 5 occasions that the experience of one group of Americans is superior to the experience of other Americans.
Well, the court in its history has always had a place for... Eventually there was a Catholic seat, there was a Jewish seat, there were seats for different kinds of people. Should people be denied places on the court?
Had the first Catholic nominee said, being Catholic is a superior experience, and therefore a Catholic judge is superior to a Protestant judge, I think they would have been withdrawn as a nominee.
Well, let me jump to this then. Is this a fight the Republicans should take, and take all the way to the walls?
This is a solemn obligation of 100 senators in both parties to render judgment on whether a lifetime appointment to be one of the 9 people who interprets the Constitution should go to this person. I think it's not a yes or no in terms of picking a fight. It's you have to decide on the Ricci case, for example, where people who had taken a year of their life to study,
New Haven fireman's case,
the New Haven fireman who did everything according to the rules. And then she accepted the fact that for clearly racial quota reasons, they shouldn't be promoted.
Well, and some people would say, well, that's the appellate court's job, is to you either say yay or nay, and some people would say that was the appropriate response to that lower court.
And I think that's an important national debate.
Lots of other things to talk about this morning, if you will. A story in the Times on Saturday about giving certain detainees the option of pleading guilty, especially in terms of the death penalty, to the capital crimes of like 9/11. Should these people be given the opportunity of pleading guilty and basically foregoing a tribunal?
Well, if somebody walks in and pleads guilty, I'm not quite sure how you avoid. I mean, at that point, what is it?
Well, it ends up avoiding the trial.
But what is it? If somebody says, I am guilty, go ahead and sentence me.
Right.
I'm not
well,
sure
they
why,
also then
I'm not a lawyer, so maybe I'm missing the...
They also then attain martyrdom.
Somebody who's desperate to be a martyr probably can achieve that. I mean, you know, the truth is, this is what people who worry about Guantanamo don't want to accept. If we let them go, they'll go back to attaining martyrdom by trying to be suicide bombers.
Let's move on to some other things. White House this morning is apparently contemplating putting North Korea back on the terrorist list. Short of further sanctions, what can be done about this country?
Well, I actually think that's a good step in the right direction, and I was delighted to see that they are responding to North Korean threats with a serious proposal. In the long run, we're going to have to find a strategy that uses diplomatic and economic means to replace the current dictatorship. I mean, this is an inevitably terrifying dictatorship that is desperately trying to get enough nuclear weapons.
Right. They have missiles. They have, and they have historically sold to whoever has the cash to buy.
Well, and they may use them. I mean, remember, this guy is totally. Kim Jong Il is about as isolated from reality as anyone on the planet.
And this country could it be any more isolated? Is there anything beyond these sanctions?
The Chinese can coerce them any morning they want to. The Chinese provide the food. The Chinese provide the heating oil. The Chinese are sustaining them. The Chinese like them as a way of dividing Korea and threatening Japan. No one should kid themselves.
So China is the key if you get China on board.
The morning China decides to do something about North Korea, they'll change overnight.
Let's talk about the future of the Republican Party a little bit. Okay. Lots that's been a subject of magazine covers and a lot of conversation for the last couple of months. Who's the most real Republican? You, Dick Cheney, Sarah Palin, Colin Powell, Rush Limbaugh?
Oh, all of us are. So is Mitt Romney, so is Bobby Jindal, so is Governor Lingle of Hawaii. So, I mean, look.
Is there room for moderates in the Republican Party?
Yes, I'm a Reagan Republican. Reagan believed in a very broad base. He always talked about my fellow Republicans and those independents and Democrats who want a better future. A third of his vote were Democrats. Here's my simple test for Republicans. In California, a state which voted 61% for Obama, 2 weeks ago, 64% of the state voted against higher taxes and more spending in Sacramento. Not a single county voted for it, which means a majority of San Francisco voted against higher spending and more taxes. Now, our Republicans,
I don't know if that's necessary. And you have a Republican governor who's sitting there saying, I have a budget of some billions and billions and billions of dollars that I can't even begin to figure out how to compensate
which is a sign of how bankrupt Sacramento is. My point is this, though. If you're thinking about a future Republican majority, you now have 64% of California that's potentially your ally. But that would mean you'd actually go to San Francisco and have a happy, positive meeting focused on taxes and spending. Now, I think Republicans
this is the Pollyanna in you, because the fact is that there's a brand new Gallup poll. It's mostly white, older, very religious, just almost demographically. The future of the party can't just be based in those folks.
But I just said that I'm happy to say let's base it on 64% of Californians, many of whom are younger, minorities, would represent a very diverse party overnight. And go back and look at Reagan in '79. 21% of the country was Republican in 1979. Reagan defeated Carter decisively a year later because he was open to everybody who was unhappy.
Well, but you also have a voice of ideological purity out there that unless people kowtow to,
you just shrug them off.
Shrug them off.
None of them. Reagan shrugged them off. Reagan was frequently attacked. I talked to Michael Reagan the other night, President Reagan's son, who pointed out that Reagan had done all sorts of things that were deviances from the conservative purity, but people knew in general he was a conservative, and people accepted that he was a conservative. And he built a very broad coalition.
So your advice to other Republicans is shrug off Rush Limbaugh?
My advice is that Colin Powell is a great American. I'm proud that he's a Republican, and Dick Cheney is a great American. I'm proud he's Republican. I'm glad both of them are Republican.
There you go. Very quickly, healthcare coming soon to a neighborhood near you.
Well, the New York Times let out the cat this morning. Health board to ration health care so the government will decide whether or not you live, and very severe restrictions on health care, and a government plan so the government can ultimately take over and run the whole system. If you think the government can't run General Motors, why would you think they can run health care?
And a government-sponsored insurance company.
It's just the first step towards a national health system. I mean, they will absolutely use that model to get to to destroy all the insurance companies and get to a national health system.
Is it inevitable?
No, I don't think so.
There certainly are there enough Republican votes to stop it?
No, I think when the average American looks at the idea that we're going to have a government bureaucrat decide whether you get, or your daughter or your granddaughter gets the treatment you need. If you look at the death rate from breast cancer in Great Britain and the death rate from breast cancer here, I don't think that's a model we're going to accept.
You have said that you will decide whether or not to run for president in 2011. What would be the most important factors in that decision?
The first factor would be whether Callista and my daughters and son-in-laws and my 2 grandchildren agreed. The second big factor would be, is it practical? Is it realistic? And the third would be, do we have a message that unifies the country and that enables you to offer an alternative vision of a successful America?
You know better than anybody. It's one thing to run, it's another thing to govern.
Absolutely.
Would the running be worth it?
I wouldn't run unless I thought we could govern. I mean, I founded American Solutions because I think there are 513,000 elected officials in America. And I think unless you can get a wave of change, that the president by himself or herself can't affect the scale of change we need to compete with China and India.
All right. Newt Gingrich, thank you very much. Good to see you.